the Bootleg Fire. I believe that's the Oregon fire. But there are multiple forest fires that have been ravaging the American West. Oregon is experiencing severe ones as well. And we have this Oregon representative who went on C-SPAN this morning, I believe, who has an opinion on why this isn't really caused by climate change, even though that opinion seems to be backed up by zero facts, zero understanding of the science. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
People tend to blame climate change. And there is no doubt that the climate is changing. There's none. It's changing. It's getting hotter. The summers are getting longer. Things are getting drier. But the true cause of the cataclysmic nature of these fires is the huge buildup of fuel, the unbelievable amount of wood that is stacked up and continues to expand every year, kind of a compound interest sort of an approach on these trees. People.
So, okay, there's a lot to unpack here. The huge buildup of wood in the forest. That's kind of the whole situation. There's a lot of wood in forest. But what he's trying to say, Representative Cliff Bentz of Oregon, who's a Republican, obviously, climate change forces the organic matter that's on the bottom of the forest, that's in the forest. That's how wildfires spread. It gets drier. It heats up more quickly. And that is why we've seen the amount of wildfires in the American West, I think, more than double since the 80s, is what some of what I've been reading. They've increased exponentially at the very least. And it's because of that organic matter drying up and more easily being kindling. What he's trying to say, though, is that it's just because there's an excess of that organic matter, or he said wood, which is hilarious, that's the cause for it.
Well, this goes back to indigenous stewardship of the land, is that Native Americans would do controlled burnings and stuff very regularly.
Right.
And we don't do that anymore because we basically, if this can be exploited for profit, then we'll attend to it. If this land can't be, then we'll let it, completely just lay fallow and build up these sorts of hazards. I mean, it absolutely, people should look into indigenous stewardship of the land when it comes to forest fires particularly.
Yeah, and there's stuff that can be done about it. It just becomes more extreme, and it has to be maintained more frequently and more comprehensively when climate change is drying up this organic matter on a more consistent and harsher basis. So it essentially acts as the lighter fluid for the forest fire, and he's blaming the wood that, like, you douse the lighter fluid in. Right? I mean, is that analogous? That's essentially what this guy's trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is in a system of capitalism, we can't actually really address this thing unless it's, a massive government program, which of course all these people are against, but because it's just not a part of our life. We don't live in harmony with nature. Not all sound kumbaya, but that's just an actual fact, and we're seeing what happens when we don't.
And another thing that he did there, too, a part of the larger Republican shift on this. Initially, mid-2000s, late 90s, the climate's not changing. The climate's not changing. Okay, well, it's not man-made is step 2. Okay, well, maybe it's man-made. Yes, the climate's changing. But it's really the fact that we are not good enough capitalists, as Matt was saying, to create the forces, or kind of what you're saying, I'm building off of it, to adequately fight against this. I mean, it's the same thing that we're hearing on Fox and Friends. Oh, we'll just build a wall around Florida. Oh, look at the Netherlands, or look at these other nations that are below sea level. Okay, that's all well and good. But what you're basically conceding there is that people who can't afford to live in these areas that are fortressed off and have theoretical moats to prevent them from all of the effects of climate change, that just screw them. That's essentially what you're saying, because there are always people that are going to be left behind, and it's always going to be the poorest. And we have a real problem with climate coverage in general in this world and in the West and in America, where the global South has been experiencing, specifically in poorer areas like Bangladesh, for example, which is kind of ground zero of the climate fight right now. They've been experiencing mass death and destruction and harm from the climate crisis for over a decade at this point. The extremity that we're seeing in the West has been even harsher in those areas. And that's because we live in America and we have resources here that aren't available for the rest of the world. So if you're going to make this claim that we can just basically fix things by picking up the wood in the forest or build walls or do whatever, you better make that a global argument, but they're not interested in that.
Yeah, and really when they say like we can have people pick up this stuff, it means like coerced prison labor, almost certainly. Not like we're actually going to pay people a job that would sustain them to do this stuff.
They're already coercing prison labor to fight the fires as firefighters, and they're dying. So that's exactly right, Matt.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.